So I think briefly, Dr. Saidi has already introduced myself, and so I am operating basically internationally. Before the pandemic, I was hardly in Malaysia because I travel a lot, and I'm also the ADEX Coral Reef Ambassador since 2013. My job is basically doing a lot of marine environmental conservation, and hydrology is part of my work. So what I do is I lead international team in researching, educating coastal and island communities around the world, and I also design and manage large-scale coral reef restoration projects around the world, including Mexico and elsewhere. And I am actively engaged in speaking and advocating environmental conservation. So my interest in hydrology is because, as you see here, understanding engineering and environmental hydrology is an important part of my work, because many aspects of coral reef degradation begins on land, and water is the key transporter to pollutant, effluents, and materials, nutrients basically, from land to the sea, which is in a way detrimental to the coral reef. In observing this, many factors compounding to the impact on marine and aquatic environment are human related. So let's move on to the topic of this presentation: environmental awareness and sustainable water consumption. Basically, it is two topics combined to be one. So I will dissect the environmental awareness topic first, then we will move on towards the sustainable water consumption in a later stage of this presentation. So water is a very broad topic to talk about. There are many areas about water that we can talk about. But my story here is about the environmental narrative, basically the link between the degradation of environment and the impact it does on the livelihood of people. Yeah. And then to dissect this, I am going to use physical evidence, basically geographical model that is happening currently. It is not a historical dissection. It is what is happening right now. There are many things that's happening right now, but I choose three of the topics that is related more or less to most part of the world, including Malaysia, and then one compounding topic that is climate change, that is on top of it. So from here, from the geographical models, then we can relate later on to the later discussion on sustainable consumption design. So with this model, then we can systematically track the events that is happening, and then link to the solution, which is what we want to find a solution to sustainable consumption design. First model is hydrogeological. Hydrogeological means anything that is water and related to the topography and earth itself, basically. So the location I selected is called Sora. Previously, this region is called Serapangji in India. Okay, the reason I choose this is because Sora is the wettest place on Earth. Basically, it receives the most rain compared to anywhere on Earth. Okay? And if it is the wettest place on Earth, then all the water-rich countries, yeah, like Malaysia and Southeast Asia, most of the tropical countries that receive so many rain, now can compare the risk involved. Okay, so what happened is in Sora, the hydrological cycle is driven by orographic rainfall. Orographic rainfall means a rainfall that is received through partly the topography of the landscape. Okay, so what happened is the oceanic wind across the Bay of Bengal that goes across towards the plain of Bangladesh, carrying all the rain clouds across the plains of Bangladesh and reaches the hill, the highlands of Sora. There, the topography plays a role where precipitation takes place. So it is called orographic precipitation or orographic rainfall. Due to this, it receives so much rain like funnel, and it is the wettest place on Earth. But even with climate change, the level of precipitation that is decreased due to climate change, Sora still receives the largest amount of rain in the world. Okay, and then let's move on to the compounding impact of mining and deforestation. So the mining in Sora happens when they are mining for limestone, basically making cement, making concrete, okay, for developments. And mining also contributed to the degradation of forests or deforestation and impacted the water catchment areas of Sora. From the wettest place on Earth, it comes the most barren place on Earth. Okay, as you can see in this. And then what compounds to it is that when water no longer stays in Sora, any drop of water that falls from the sky flows right away towards the plain. It doesn't stay in Sora, and therefore Sora become a water scarce location. The environmental degradation also caused decline in agriculture, and then the hydrogeological damage is also a combination of that. And eventually it leads to natural resource change of insecurity in livelihood, and of course people will start moving away from this area, migration and displacement. Now we are going to look at what kind of conflict and risk and impact that it creates. Yeah. So what happened is every single drop of rain in these highlands and the hills of Sora flows straight down into the plains of Bangladesh, and it causes floods. The intensity of floods in Bangladesh increases even though global warming and climate change says that precipitation is getting less. The reason is not about the precipitation. The reason is not about the warming. The reason is about the precipitation and the flow. The amount of people that is impacted from Sora down to the plain of Bangladesh are millions of lives infected. So back to the story, then we say feasibility of mining and deforestation to build cities. For example, to make cement to build cities. Is it feasible when millions of people in Sora and Sarpanji region is experiencing water scarcity and degrading their livelihood, and then also the millions of people and properties that was damaged and affected by it. And this is a call about the impact of the environment and water flow and its hydrology. Okay, so what do we learn from here? Now, when we see Sora as the wettest place on earth, and now becomes scarce, the first conclusion is that water source abundance is not a measure of security and sustainability. This is what the message tells us. No matter we are in Malaysia or in Vietnam or in Myanmar or in Thailand, where we have received so much rainfall and we think that we are water-rich country, and then there's no threats of water shortage. And that is not true. If we can see the wettest place on earth can be affected by unsustainable practices, that means the abundance of water is not a measure of security and sustainability. Okay, this is the message here first. Second, the altered hydrology of the environment, the damage that was done is very hard to rehabilitate, right? The reason is when, for example, land become barren, what happened is that the lack of water in the soil makes the soil become compacted. And when the next water come in, they don't really be absorbed by the land anymore because it's too compacted. They start to flow away. Okay, so to make the soil be able to infiltrate water again, it takes time and it takes a lot of reforestation and all that again, basically to reverse and offset the impact of the development. Prevention of hydrogeological damage is key. This is happening in all Southeast Asian countries, whereby deforestation is rampant. And people don't realize that as the flatlands become all dominated, all exploited, they start to go higher. When they start to go higher, this is what is going to happen. The hydrological or geographical model of Sora is going to repeat itself in different scale, of course, in different countries. But the risks and the challenges will come if we don't manage it well and we don't have a preventive steps, right? So this is model number one. So let's move on to the next geographical model. This one is very drastic, I can say, a very drastic change of life of people caused by a gradual degradation in its environment and also its water source. Okay, Punjab, India. Punjab is not a green land to start with. It is an arid land. So what happened in Punjab is after the Second World War. After the Second World War, Punjab still is an arid land with poor people. But during the end of the Second World War, the biggest fear of most countries is that its population start to go into communism. So to prevent this from happening, a green revolution was set in place for them to basically make Punjab an agriculture-rich country, right? So they adopted the American industrial agriculture system, which is basically everywhere in the world is trying to use that model because it's the American dream. It's make people rich and all these dreams. Okay, so When that happened, for 40 years, since the end of the Second World War, say 1950s, 1947, 1950s, until say 40 years down the line, okay, until the 90s, Punjab is prospered. It becomes the breadbasket of India. Because of their productivity, they also make India a food surplus country of the world. Okay, so when it becomes like that, people don't realize the gradual impact, a combination of climate change and the gradual impact of their consumption of groundwater. Remember, their rainfall is very small. They cannot rely on rainfall. So what do they rely on? They rely on water from the ground. They extract water from the underground aquifers. Okay, that was not a serious thing in 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, because population is not as big as today yet. Although it's already big, but it's not as big as today. As the population of people around the globe grow, the demand for food grows. The demand for food means expansion of farmland. Okay, when you expand arid land into farmland, meaning that you are going to put more stress on the supply of water, which is underground. You can't see it. You know it's there, you can't see it. So to a point where the combination of low precipitation of the area, rain is getting less frequent, and then consumption of groundwater become more, they suck all the well dry. Okay, so when the well becomes dry, what they do is they dig deeper. To dig deeper, they need equipment, they need contractors to do that. And therefore, most of these farmers go to the bank and they take big loans and they deepen the wells to reach for the deeper water. Deepening the well means deepening the depths. Okay, see, here is where it becomes more pronounced on the economic stresses in the community. Okay, so as they dig deeper, they deepen their well, they deepen their depths, and then climate change causes less rain, triggering droughts. Okay, that means the water table reduce even further. Most of their well run dry. Environmental degradation, there are two prongs here. First, the degradation that is indirect, which is the climate change. And then there's the direct degradation through pollution. Yeah. Extensive use of chemical fertilizer and pesticides. Of course, it's an arid land. You green it, you attract pests. When you attract pests, when it's so large, you have to use something drastic to control it. So pesticides is used. And to make it, to put nutrient in the soil that is arid, you put chemical fertilizer. Okay? So this is currently practiced in most countries that has plantations, big farms. It's still being practiced today. Okay, 40 years down the line, by the 90s, what happened is pandemic starts. Most of the farmers and farm workers in Punjab is cancer stricken, basically. They have cancer because they are consuming the water that is tainted with heavy metal, arsenic, pesticides, yeah, and whatever they have put on the ground is in the water, and they are consuming it. They don't see it in the beginning, in the 50s, in the 60s, when it's prospering. It is when basically the graph is spiking and they are getting really comfortable. They don't see it. And it starts to degrade in the 80s and become in the 90s, and it starts to show the impact, the long-term impact towards the people. There are so many people who are getting cancer in Punjab that they make a train. They call it the Cancer Express train to carry the sick people to hospital. You need a train. That's how many? How many? That is 60% of the farming communities throughout Punjab are cancer-stricken. Okay? So now we see the combination of economic stresses that's already there. Productivity, of course, is going to be, of their farmland is going to be affected by the drought. So most of people end up cannot pay their debts, and the health issue comes, the pandemic, to compound to the already problem. Then we have famine. We have famine. Punjab is the world capital of suicide, basically, I can say. I am doing research and I don't find much more other areas that is environmentally impacted people that has committed so many suicides. There are about more than 16,000 suicides in the course of time between year 2000 and 2015. That means there is more than 1,000 people a year. And if you search online for news about suicide in Punjab, you'll see like, oh, there are 7 suicides within 24 hours today. And that is kind of, to us, it is traumatic, right? But it happens there almost on daily basis. This is what happened. This is what happened and it's still happening today. Okay. And then what do we learn from here? So we learn from here, the first thing is that the long-term impact of industrial farming and the extensive use of chemicals to turn arid land into green. Yeah. First, we deplete the water resource, and then we need to put in so many things. To the industrial world, it is absolutely fine. Why? Because when you want to put chemical fertilizers onto an arid land to make it green, commerce began, commerce continued, buying and selling, money change hands. Okay. The pesticide, whatever, right? And then the problem is the length of time that you can enjoy this wealth is shortened, basically, within the 35 years. That's it. That's it. After that 35 years, you begin to see the implication of it. You begin to see. By 50 years, like now, after the Green Revolution, you see the impact. Okay? So it is partly climate change that is driven, but mainly human-created problems, right? So excessive use of chemical fertilizers is harmful, not just to the land, but to the people and all living species within that environment, right? So not to mention about how many species that was lost in the process of Green Revolution. Like for example, in Malaysia now, how many species of tropical marine biodiversity that was lost through plantation? The similar way, right? How many species that was gone, basically, in Punjab? Newer and more regenerative, sustainable farming technology must replace. This is where science, this is where all the institutions, where all the science should concentrate, right? We cannot be comfortable going to the supermarket, buying vegetable and not thinking where it's coming from, what it impacts the people who make it, right? We should start to change that. We should start to change that. It has to come. That's the reason why in the Western world today, organic produce was like everybody is willing to pay extra money to buy organic produce. They don't buy like off the shelf much anymore, right? It's a trend, but it haven't reached the third world countries. It haven't reached most countries, right? And most countries are still immersed in this, has not woken up from this phenomenon, right? Okay. So we see two models now. One is the depletion of the hydrology. Second is the overconsumption of water and the input of toxic materials. The third part, I can say 50-50 between impact of environmental changes, which is climate change, and mismanagement of resources. Okay, so I choose Bolivia. Why I choose Bolivia to tell you this story? Because Bolivia is the only country in the world that repeats mistake twice. Okay, so first we look at the environment impact that is impacting Bolivia before the mismanagement happened. Okay, so the gradual melting of glaciers and ice caps in the Andes Mountains has reduced the volume of water that is carried downstream, of course, to the rivers and streams that goes across Bolivia, where farmers will use this for basically produce food. So, and then in the 90s, it began, many countries began to adopt privatization. I can say all countries, including Malaysia, I can say a lot of countries starts to adopt privatization to lessen the stresses of management of many departments. Government has to run themselves. Okay, but some of privatization is good, but some is bad. The privatization of resources like water, which is a life-giving substance. Basically, without water, many things, including human, cannot live. That is incorrect. You can manage them, but you cannot dominate them. Okay. So, due to the water scarcity, first began with climate change and the receding water in the rivers and streams, and then privatization comes to play. In 1999, the first privatization, the Bolivian government contracted the water infrastructure and services to an American company. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with privatization of services. Okay, you can treat water, you can pack water, bottle water, you can transport water, you can create infrastructure for water services for a fee, yes, but you cannot put a price of water, because water is essential for all human rights. I will go to this later. Okay. Basically, the problem with mismanagement is they start to dominate. What they do, they will then impose a higher cost for the infrastructure that they do. The company that is contracted to do that, what they do is they build infrastructure, they build all the treatment plant, and they do a very good job at it. And they claim at that time that 96% of the population of Bolivia have access to water. Okay, so this is where it goes wrong. Having access to water doesn't mean that people are able to afford it. Okay, so to pay for the infrastructure that they invest in, they impose a very high connection fee. That 96% of people that they claim have access to water don't have water in their house because they could not afford to pay to connect the water to their homes. Yes, the water is available. It's not that it's not available. It's just not available in their home. They can't connect it. So it becomes political and it becomes riots, and people, of course, grievance of people will slowly lead to violence. And from a peaceful demonstration, the government sent in armed forces, police, and eventually quite a number of people has been killed by live fire of the police. And eventually the intensity becomes really great that the company had to leave the country and the president resigned from his post. Okay, that's the first mistake. That is in year 2000. Yeah, 10 years down the line, what happened? 10 years down the line, the United Nations, through its General Assembly, do this 64-92 resolution, which explicitly recognized water and clean sanitation is essential to all humans, and it is the realization of all human rights. Okay, this is 2010. But then, what we will learn from this is that whatever the plight of the global community, like the United Nations or whatever global community there is, it does not mean compliance locally. In Bolivia, 9 years after the UN resolution in 2019, in 2019, it again gave concession to a French corporation, a French giant called Suez, which also claimed the same thing. Of course, they claim the same thing because the infrastructure is already there. What they need to do is to invest a little bit more to modernize it, and 96% of the population have access to water. It's the same thing over again, right? And then another uprising overthrown the privatization again, of course, overthrown the government and result in change of president, which is a native now, which is a person who realized all these factors, right? But the human sufferings from the pre-2000 crisis and then compounding with the climate change, was it necessary to repeat it again 9 years later? So the suffering does not end in 2000. The suffering ends in 2019 because it is recurrent, right? This is what's happening around the world. Whatever the plight of the global community does not mean compliance locally. This is the lesson we must learn, right? There can't be any resolution about deforestation, about degrading environment or anything by the United Nations. It doesn't mean countries will actually practice it. They will play the facade at United Nations Assembly. They will go there with representatives. They will nod their head, but they will have a different agenda behind it. Every country has is the same thing, right? Otherwise, war would have stopped almost immediately when United Nations Assembly says no, but war continues. That's the same thing, because locally, whatever the plight of the international community, sometimes, most of the time did not apply. Okay, then this is what I'm going to relate to us now in the water consumption. Right? We have learned from three of this model. Right? So environmental awareness part, the tree model, the hydrogeological impact, the groundwater, the privatization. There are a lot more factors to put on, but I just put three because of the length of this presentation. Otherwise, it will be very long. Right? And the compounding, you can see the different color here, green, the compounding impact of climate change. Basically, all this part, wherever human management or human consumption is, there is a compounding impact of climate change. Okay, that's the story here. And then sustainable consumption design. Who are the respondents of this? Who are the actors to this thing? Basically, if you started it, you have to solve it. Okay. Now, basically, we are going to talk about environmental conscious consumerism, which related to you, me, my family, your family, everybody as an individual. Okay. When it comes to environmental awareness, when it comes to sustainability, it started in the same way. Sustainable water consumption starts from us, from every single person. It doesn't start from a country, community, to the family, to us. No, it doesn't start that way. It doesn't work that way. If you think that countries are going to do campaign and it's going to put a budget and then it's going down to the community and the community going to distribute it to all families and going down to you, it doesn't work that way. Environmental conservation, it doesn't work that way too. So above the country, there's of course the global community. Whatever the United Nations gives to countries, countries give to community, community whether they give it or not to the families, it doesn't mean that it's going to solve the problem, because the problem works the other way around. Okay? The problem works from us, from individual. No matter what campaign there is outside my door, if I did not open my door to let it in and adopt it, that campaign doesn't work. It is not accomplishable, right? No matter what the United Nations says in Paris, to our representative that brings home to Malaysia, for example, and then get the message across to the local government get across to district level, to your families. But the member of the family is who? Is you, me, individually. And that is the actors. That is the key actors, right? If the key actors does not take it, no matter how many billion United Nations put in their budget and put down to your country and put down to your community and put down to your family, it failed, right? Because the key player is you, me, and everybody, right? We can talk all day, all year long about this issue, but if individually we are not in realization of this, and we are not taking it seriously, then the entire system or whatever strategy there is will not work. Okay? Then let's look at individually. How do we perceive things? Okay. First is to realize. Number one, when it comes to water, I want people to realize that saving water is saving life. That's it. That's it. That's as easy as that. But to the final extent, you can say, okay, I'm going to check all my daily habits of consumption. My daily habits of consumption. Every day I go out my door, on my way to work, I stop and buy 2 bottles of water. And then I bring to work, and then I have that 2 bottles of water. In a year, that is more than 700 bottles of water. Okay, and then that water does not appear on the shelf just like that. It needs to be treated. It needs to be bottled. It needs to be transported. And every step of it requires energy, requires, of course, exchange of money. Then it's so many processes to get to you. And then you consume that water because it's cheap, especially in countries in Malaysia, it's really cheap water, right? But if you are in a country like in Singapore, for example, it's $3 a bottle, Singapore. That is 14 ringgit in Malaysia. That's expensive. Then the people in Singapore is more water conscious, and you can see everyone in Singapore almost carry a recyclable bottle and refills, right? They don't really go to buy water on the shelf like we do in Malaysia, for example. So besides that, besides all the energy and the carbon footprint and whatever environmental issues that is involving in transporting water to your shelf that you buy every day, you also contributing to the secondary environmental impact, which is the pollution from the bottles itself, right? Single-use plastic is a plague, a disease to the planet, basically. So if the population of 30 million of people in Malaysia consumes bottled water, right? It translates to, if it's 2 liters per person per day, it translates to 60 million bottles. And it translates to ×4, that is 240 million ringgit a day. That is 100,000 US dollars, 100 million, well, 240 million ringgit spent. Yeah, that's $100 million basically. Well, it's exchange hands. Yes, it's good for economy. Yes, maybe. Yeah, but this volume, and we are talking about now pandemic and a lot of humanitarian needs just in this and that. And that 240 million per day can actually be used for this, to cover these things. If people put 2 ringgit a day or 4 ringgit a day, instead of buying water, they filter the water in their homes and take bottled water to work, right? As simple as that, the impact is huge, right? This is individually. We have not gone to the family level here, right? So remember the first thing about hydrogeological thing, the abundance of water resource in our country does not guarantee security. One day, when our dams, the level of water in our dams starts to recede, that is when we feel the pain, right? That is when we start to feel the pain. Why do we feel the pain at that point? Because we have not prepared ourselves for catastrophe. Yeah, the old way of handling catastrophe is like, oh, when a pandemic happened, now COVID-19, and then it is a wake-up call. Right? It is a wake-up call. And then we start to find a countermeasure plan for this problem. We wait until the problem arises. Then we try to solve it. Remember the saying, prevention is better than cure? Yeah? We haven't adopted that ideology. What I'm doing here, daily basis, about environmental conservation education to the public, is to prepare them for future potentially ecological catastrophe. When things happen and they don't know what to do. That is the wake-up call thing, and to find a solution when the thing is already being too bad to solve, right? But I work the other way around. I work to tell them on a daily basis, if this happens, that will, the impact of it will be like this. And if you don't want this to happen, you will do this. It's up to you. I'm not forcing you to follow, but this is the message. At least there is somebody who keep waking them up from their sleep before things happen, right? That is what I'm doing. So on a family level, for example, you learn something from school, from institution, from the public, from the government posters, and whatnot. You learn something almost every day, right? But it doesn't go the other way around. Like I said, the government can put posters, campaigns, budgets, money, resources, but it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work the other way around. It doesn't go to the community and go to your family and to you. Because you are key. If you don't adopt this, no matter what the United Nations says, no matter what your politician says, no matter what your village leader says, no matter what your mom and dad says, it's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen because you are the key. You are the soldiers. You are the solution as well as the problem. Basically, individually as humans, we are all walking solutions and walking problems. It is up to us to choose. If we want to choose to become a walking problem, then be it. I can't say no to you. I can say yes to you. It is you to decide, right? So it has to work that way. Bring it home, good things, right? And reward it and share it with your family and ask your family, hey, isn't it good to do this?
GM energy untuk Malaysia.
Yeah. Is there a question? Okay. Anyway, is it feasible for the family to save water and save energy? I was checking my time now. I thought it was a time warning alert. Okay. Now, saving water
join
saves
Google
lives.
meeting.
In the family level, basically, saving water saves energy, saves money in the end, right? For example, now, if every single one, say 5 in the family, every single one wants to do a laundry and they do it privately by themselves, that's 5 people doing laundry in a week, right? And then that's 5 times the water usage. But if collectively 5 people put everything in a basket and wash together, it's only 1 time that the machine is running. That's 1 time of water consumption. That's simple as that. Things that are simple, right? We don't go to the higher level of what Cape Town is experienced, where people have to recycle their grey water from their dishes into the toilet. That is too complicated. Do the simple thing first, right? In the family, and that is how things work. So whether it is water conservation or environmental conservation or conservation of the earth, it starts with you and me, go down to the family. Then only we start to talk to our neighbors, right? And we say, hey, look, I've been saving some money because I wash my car only now once a week. I used to wash it every 2 days, right? And then, yeah, neighbors listen, and we have a conversation about consumption and all this daily basis, basically. Between neighbors, one of the biggest topics is about saving money for home, what we are doing at home, right? how we save electricity, how we save water, right? We share food and stuff. Every time we share food, we know that what kind of consumption there is, right? So that is how the community comes to play. Then the community have the realization and start to have celebration like this World Water Day campaign and all this. Now you can celebrate with a meaning because you are in it, right? Any kind of environmental celebration, World Ocean Day, World Earth Day, right? Switching off power for 1 hour and all this, it is the facade of things, right? It is the on the face of things. It's the mask that you are wearing. But if you did not be part of that practice, then the mask will be there forever. You are just wearing a mask. Nothing inside is meaningful, actually, basically. You can have World Water Day, World Ocean Day, World whatever day, right? But it is just a poster and a facade. Maybe you wear a t-shirt, that's it, right? It does not mean any more than that. So then the governmental thing. Look at it this way. Governments are good at imposing policies. This is what they are doing. They are policymakers. They are advocates of international flights and things like that. They basically they're transmitting what the international community are saying about water consumption, right? Like here, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, SDG. I work mainly not on SDG 6. My work is on SDG 14, life below water. I mainly rehabilitate aquatic environment and coral reefs, basically, okay? But water hydrology plays a big role in my work because every pollutant, every nutrient will start from land and is transported by water. So I need to learn the engineering hydrology of places. Every location I select to do a project, the first thing we do in an environmental assessment based on all these factors, we call it the environmental cascade. Environmental cascade is like a domino, things like falling one over the other and eventually landed in your domain. And your domain is down the stream. But whatever happens on top of the stream, you need to know. Otherwise, my project in the ocean will not work, right? So the sustainability development goal we are talking about is water sanitation, the SDG 6. And then there are all, of course, other SDGs that you can and follow. It is not just for corporation. It's not just for your institution. It's not for a school, for things. This message must be carried by us. Remember, going back to the thing, remember about individuals, how important we are. Without us practicing it, you can say anything, SDG, whatever you want, right? You can say SDG 1001. It doesn't work because you and me and the working solution and the working problem is the key to all this, okay? So now, summarizing all this, okay? We have learned about the hydrogeological damage that is impacting. We have learned about the hydrological, the millions of people that was affected by that. And then we also learned about the pandemic in Punjab and how it affects people over 50 years down the line. That is why people are ignorant about the environment and the water and the resources issue, because the impact doesn't come tomorrow. It doesn't come today. It doesn't come when you switch on your light. it comes 50 years down the line. Okay? But then, if you look at 50 years, it is within a lifetime, meaning that you will see it within your lifetime. Things that's changing, right? That's critical. And then we learn about the mismanagement. Okay? The mismanagement is a thing that is happening everywhere. It's unavoidable because it's human nature. Things will, well, people can say anything, but they will do differently. You can't predict how people, that includes the people you vote to be in power in your countries, basically. So you cannot predict from what they say to what their actions is. So, and therefore, we have the only way to be the solution to this kind of problem is unity. People cannot break apart, right? People cannot be like, you are Indian, I'm Chinese, or I'm Malay, or you are Caucasian, or you are black or white, think. No. Every single one of us, no matter what color you are, or what religion you believe, or whatever personal traits you have, you are the same thing. You are the problems and you are the solution. Okay. So by people saying no to all this mismanagement ethics, that's the only way to do it, right? So it's your rights, it's everybody's rights to say no to privatization of water resources. They can privatize the services. They cannot give concessions to these people, because when somebody owns water, they own your life, basically. Yeah. So that's the message I'm carrying here. And also, when we know that sustainability, sustainable water consumption is an individuality thing. It's you, me, and everybody. Everybody has to take on this realization to be able to make it work. There is no guidebook. I can write a 100-page guidebook, but it's useless if you, me, and individuality people who are the problem and the solution did not practice it. Okay? So, on behalf of the organizer of this organization, of this presentation, and from my organization, Ocean Quest Global, for myself, my family, I would say thank you for listening to my lengthy presentation this time. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much,